Sometimes the safest place to hide is in the arms of the one man the whole city fears. Emily Carter never imagined those words would become the truth that changed her life forever. On a cool Friday evening in downtown Chicago, the sidewalks buzzed with office workers, tourists, and couples heading toward glowing restaurants, while traffic rolled steadily beneath the amber streetlights. Emily hurried through the crowd with her shoulders tense, clutching the strap of her worn leather purse, as if it could somehow hold together every broken piece of her life. At 29, she had learned to ignore the judgmental stares that often followed her curvy figure, but the insults still left invisible bruises no one else could see. She worked long shifts at a neighborhood bakery, spent most of her paycheck helping her widowed mother keep the lights on, and quietly accepted that kindness rarely seemed to earn respect in a world obsessed with appearances. Tonight, however, the fear in her chest had nothing to do with cruel strangers. Heavy footsteps echoed behind her. She glanced over her shoulder and immediately recognized Ryan, the possessive ex-boyfriend she had finally found the courage to leave 3 months earlier. His face burned with frustration as he pushed through pedestrians, calling her name louder each time she ignored him. People looked for a second before quickly returning to their own conversations, unwilling to become involved. Emily picked up her pace, her breathing becoming uneven as she crossed another busy intersection. She knew Ryan well enough to recognize the dangerous determination in his eyes. He hated losing control, and public embarrassment only fueled his anger. Her phone battery had died an hour earlier after a double shift, leaving her without the comfort of calling anyone for help. She spotted the entrance to a luxury hotel across the street, hoping security inside might offer protection, but Ryan closed the distance before she could reach the revolving doors. He grabbed her wrist firmly enough to stop her without throwing her off balance. "You're coming with me," he demanded through clenched teeth. Emily pulled against his grip, refusing to meet his eyes. "Let go." Several people slowed for a moment, then continued walking when Ryan forced a smile that disguised the tension. Embarrassment mixed with panic, as Emily realized no one understood what was really happening. Then she noticed someone standing only a few feet away near the hotel entrance. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit beneath a long black overcoat, his posture calm despite the chilly wind swirling around him. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, tall, broad-shouldered, and completely composed. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't distracted by the commotion. His sharp grey eyes remained fixed on Ryan with an unreadable expression. Emily had no idea who he was. She only knew she needed one impossible chance. Acting entirely on instinct, she yanked her wrist free, rushed toward the stranger, gently placed both hands against his coat, and kissed him before fear could convince her to stop. The world seemed to freeze. Conversations nearby faded into stunned silence. Emily stepped back almost immediately, her cheeks burning brighter than the hotel lights above them. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, barely able to breathe. "Please pretend you know me." The stranger studied her face without speaking. Instead of anger, surprise, or confusion, there was only quiet calculation behind his eyes. Ryan stormed toward them, pointing accusingly. "Who do you think you are?" he barked. Before Emily could apologize again, the stranger slowly turned his attention toward Ryan. His expression remained almost emotionless, but something about the way he carried himself instantly changed the atmosphere. Even the hotel valet standing nearby straightened his posture. A black SUV rolled silently to the curb, as though responding to an invisible signal. 2 men in dark suits stepped out without hesitation, scanning the street with disciplined precision. Ryan's confidence faltered for the first time that evening. Emily noticed it too, but she still didn't understand why. The stranger calmly removed his gloves, his voice low enough that Ryan had to lean forward to hear every word. "You should leave." There was no shouting, no threats, no dramatic display of force, yet every syllable carried absolute authority. Ryan hesitated, trying to recover his pride, but uncertainty spread across his face as more identical SUVs appeared behind the first. Men with discreet earpieces positioned themselves around the entrance without creating panic among the guests. Emily slowly realized the man she had kissed wasn't simply wealthy or important. The employees greeted him with silent respect. The security team watched him instead of the street, waiting for a single instruction. She had thrown herself into the arms of someone whose presence alone could stop a confrontation without lifting a finger. As Ryan reluctantly stepped backward, refusing to admit defeat but suddenly unwilling to push further, Emily looked into the stranger's steady eyes and quietly thanked him. She expected him to nod politely before walking away forever. Instead, he asked one simple question that sent a chill through her entire body. "Do you always kiss strangers?" he said evenly, "or only when your life depends on it?" Emily's heart pounded so hard she could barely hear the city around her. She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. The stranger held her gaze for another quiet second before looking toward Ryan, who was still lingering across the sidewalk, pretending to check his phone while clearly debating whether to try one last time. The man beside her did not raise his voice or even glance toward the security team waiting nearby. He simply said, "Make sure he gets home safely and understands that following this woman again is not an option." One of the suited men gave a respectful nod and walked toward Ryan with calm confidence. There was no shouting, no struggle, and no public scene. Within moments, Ryan reluctantly climbed into a waiting rideshare after a brief conversation that Emily could not hear. The stranger then turned back to her as though the interruption had been nothing more than an inconvenient breeze. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Emily instinctively rubbed the wrist Ryan had grabbed earlier. Faint red marks were already beginning to appear. "I'm fine," she answered softly, though the slight tremble in her voice suggested otherwise. His eyes briefly settled on the bruising before returning to her face. "No," he replied evenly. "You're trying very hard to convince yourself that you are." Emily looked away, embarrassed that someone she had met only a minute ago seemed able to read her emotions so easily. "Thank you for helping me," she said. "I know this must seem ridiculous." "Fear rarely looks ridiculous," he answered. "It usually looks exactly like what I just saw." Before she could respond, another black SUV stopped beside the curb. An older gentleman stepped out, dressed in an expensive navy suit. "Mr. Moretti," he said respectfully, "the council is waiting." Emily froze for a split second. Moretti. The name sounded strangely familiar, though she could not immediately place it. The man she had kissed acknowledged the newcomer with a slight nod, but made no move to leave. Instead, he looked back at Emily. "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" She hesitated. Her apartment was only 15 minutes away, but Ryan knew exactly where she lived. The thought of walking home alone suddenly felt impossible. "I'm not sure." His expression remained calm, almost unreadable. "Then allow my driver to take you home." Emily immediately shook her head. "I couldn't ask for that." "You didn't." His answer came without arrogance, only certainty. "I'm offering." She studied him more carefully now. Everything about him suggested extraordinary wealth, yet there was something unusual beneath the polished appearance. Unlike other successful men she had encountered while delivering catering orders to corporate events, he showed no interest in impressing anyone. He never smiled to appear charming. He never boasted. Every movement seemed measured, controlled, and quietly dangerous, like someone accustomed to making decisions that others obeyed without question. "I don't even know your first name," she admitted. "Adrian," he replied. "Adrian Moretti." Emily smiled politely. "I'm Emily Carter." "I know," he said before catching himself. She blinked in confusion. Adrian allowed the smallest hint of amusement to soften his otherwise composed expression. "Your former boyfriend shouted it often enough." Emily laughed despite herself, surprised by the unexpected warmth hidden beneath his reserved demeanour. It was the first genuine smile she had managed all evening. Adrian noticed it immediately. For just an instant, the hard edges around his eyes seemed to ease, as though seeing her smile mattered more than he intended to admit. The moment passed almost as quickly as it had arrived. "Miss Carter," the older gentleman interrupted carefully, "our security team can escort you upstairs while the vehicle is prepared." Emily looked toward Adrian again. "You really don't have to do all this." "Perhaps not," he answered, "but I will." She finally accepted with a quiet nod. Inside the grand hotel lobby, polished marble floors reflected the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. Guests spoke in low voices while a pianist filled the room with gentle music. Emily suddenly became painfully aware of her inexpensive shoes, flour still clinging faintly to the sleeves of her bakery uniform, and the curious glances from elegantly dressed visitors. She instinctively folded her arms across herself, hoping to disappear. Adrian noticed the change immediately. Without a word, he removed his tailored overcoat and draped it lightly across her shoulders. "You don't need to hide," he said. "But everyone is staring," Emily whispered. "No," Adrian answered. "They're wondering who earned enough of my attention for me to give away my coat." Emily looked up, stunned by the quiet sincerity in his voice. No one had ever defended her dignity with such effortless confidence. Before she could thank him again, the older gentleman returned holding a tablet. His normally composed expression had become unexpectedly tense. "Mr. Moretti," he said quietly, "there's been an incident at the warehouse. Someone betrayed us." Adrian's eyes hardened instantly. Every trace of warmth disappeared behind the cold discipline of a man accustomed to surviving dangerous worlds. Emily watched the transformation in stunned silence. Only seconds earlier he had been offering comfort to a frightened stranger. Now he looked like someone capable of commanding an army without raising his voice. He slipped a phone from his pocket, glanced at a single message, and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he looked directly at Emily again, this time with unmistakable concern. "Change of plans," he said. "Whoever followed you tonight may not have been acting alone." Emily felt the warmth leave the elegant hotel lobby as Adrian Moretti's final words settled heavily between them. Only moments earlier she had believed the nightmare with Ryan had finally ended, yet the calm certainty in Adrian's voice told her something far more complicated had just begun. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly. Adrian looked toward the older gentleman, who immediately dismissed several members of the hotel staff with a subtle gesture before answering. "Someone knew exactly where I would be tonight," Adrian said. "That almost never happens." Emily frowned. "You think Ryan was following you?" Adrian slowly shook his head. "No, I think Ryan believed he was following you." Before Emily could ask another question, one of Adrian's security officers hurried into the lobby carrying a small evidence bag. Inside rested a tiny electronic device no larger than a coin. "We found this beneath the rear bumper of your car, sir," the guard reported. "It was transmitting until 10 minutes ago." Adrian accepted the bag without visible surprise. "A tracker," Emily whispered. "Yes," Adrian replied, "which means someone expected me to arrive here tonight." Emily suddenly remembered how perfectly timed everything had seemed. Ryan had appeared only after she finished work. He had chased her through crowded streets until she reached the hotel entrance. Without realizing it, she had run directly into Adrian's path. The thought sent a chill across her shoulders despite the warmth of his coat. "This is my fault," she murmured. Adrian looked at her with calm disbelief. "No, someone else's decision created this situation. Don't carry responsibility that doesn't belong to you." His words eased the guilt weighing on her, but only slightly. The older gentleman stepped closer. "Mr. Moretti, we should leave immediately. The council can wait. Your safety cannot." Adrian remained still for another moment before making his decision. "Cancel the meeting." The older gentleman looked surprised. "Sir?" Adrian's expression never changed. "My enemy already knows where I was supposed to be. They don't need to know where I'm going next." Emily watched every person around him move the instant he finished speaking. Phones came out. Quiet instructions spread through hidden earpieces. Vehicles outside repositioned within seconds. No one questioned him. No one hesitated. The realization finally struck her with full force. Adrian wasn't simply an influential businessman. He was a man whose authority reached far beyond ordinary wealth. As they walked through a private corridor toward an underground parking garage, Emily noticed framed photographs displaying Chicago's history, but Adrian barely glanced at them. His attention remained focused on every doorway, every reflection in the polished marble, every passing face. It was the awareness of someone who had spent years expecting danger. Once inside the secure garage, Adrian opened the rear passenger door of a black armored SUV. "Please," he said. Emily hesitated. "If I leave with you, won't I become part of whatever this is?" Adrian answered honestly, "You already are." The simplicity of his reply frightened her more than any dramatic warning could have. She quietly climbed inside. The vehicle pulled away with 2 additional SUVs surrounding it. Through the tinted windows, Chicago's skyline glowed against the night sky, while traffic continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Emily folded her hands together to stop them from shaking. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian nodded. "How dangerous is your life?" He looked out the window for several seconds before answering. "Danger becomes ordinary when you've lived with it long enough." That's not really an answer. For the first time since leaving the hotel, the corner of Adrian's mouth lifted into the faintest smile. "No, it isn't." Emily sighed. "You're impossible to read." "That's intentional." Silence settled between them until Adrian's phone vibrated once. He glanced at the screen, and the small trace of warmth disappeared from his face. "We've confirmed the warehouse betrayal," he said quietly. 3 trusted men are injured. 1 shipment is missing. Emily noticed the older gentleman sitting in the front passenger seat lower his head slightly, as though the news carried personal weight. Adrian closed his eyes briefly before reopening them with renewed focus. "Find out who approved tonight's delivery schedule," he instructed. "Start with my inner circle." Emily looked at him in surprise. "You think someone close to you is responsible?" "The most dangerous enemies rarely stand across the table," Adrian answered. "They usually sit beside you." His words lingered in the silence until the convoy suddenly slowed. Red brake lights stretched ahead. Construction barriers narrowed the road into a single lane. One of the lead security vehicles stopped completely. The driver frowned. This route was supposed to be clear. Adrian's eyes immediately sharpened. Reverse. Before the driver could react, a delivery truck rolled sideways across the street behind them, blocking the only escape. Emily's heartbeat surged. Adrian. He reached across the seat and gently lowered her head beneath the window line without taking his eyes off the road ahead. "Stay down." At that exact moment, the headlights of 3 black SUVs switched on simultaneously from the darkness ahead, sealing every possible exit while unknown figures slowly stepped into the street. Emily pressed herself against the seat as Adrian's hand remained protectively above her shoulder, shielding her from the window without touching her any more than necessary. The convoy came to a complete stop. Outside, the 3 SUVs formed a wall across the narrow street, while several men emerged with measured confidence, their faces partially hidden beneath dark baseball caps. No one shouted. No one rushed forward. The silence itself felt like a carefully planned weapon. Adrian studied every movement through the reinforced glass. "This isn't a robbery," he said calmly. "They're waiting for permission." The older gentleman in the front seat glanced at the security monitor connected to the lead vehicle. "We've lost contact with the first SUV." Adrian's expression hardened. "Jammed communications." Emily's pulse raced. "Can they get inside?" Adrian answered without looking away from the windshield. Not easily. His driver shifted the armoured vehicle into reverse, only to stop as the delivery truck behind them remained firmly across both lanes. "No exit," the driver reported. Adrian gave one quiet instruction: hold position. Emily stared at him in disbelief. "We're not leaving?" "Not until I understand who wants me trapped." His composure seemed almost impossible. Every person inside the vehicle took their cue from his voice alone. Then one of the men outside stepped forward, holding a tablet above his head so it could be seen through the windshield. A live security image appeared on the screen. Emily immediately recognized the bakery where she worked. The lights were still on, even though closing time had passed. Her manager stood near the register with several employees gathered together, unaware they were being watched. Emily felt the color drain from her face. "Why are they showing that?" Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Because they want you looking at the screen instead of looking at them." Almost as he finished speaking, one figure quietly disappeared from Emily's peripheral vision. Adrian noticed it instantly. "Left side," he warned. Before anyone else reacted, the armoured SUV rocked from a heavy impact against the driver's door. The reinforced metal absorbed the blow, but the force confirmed Adrian's suspicion. The display at the bakery had been nothing more than a distraction. Security agents surrounding the convoy moved immediately, positioning themselves between the vehicles without escalating into reckless violence. Their discipline reflected years of preparation. Emily looked at Adrian. "They're using me." "No," he replied. They're trying to use your compassion. His phone vibrated with an encrypted alert. After reading a single line, he slowly exhaled. We've identified the warehouse shipment. The older gentleman turned around. Recovered? Adrian shook his head. No, it never left. Emily frowned. I don't understand. Adrian looked directly at her. There was no stolen shipment. Then why? His answer came with quiet certainty. Someone created a false emergency to pull me away from my normal route. Someone else ensured Ryan chased you into my path. Every step tonight has been designed to force us into the same place at the same time. Emily struggled to process the realization. She had believed her desperate kiss had been nothing more than an impulsive act born from fear. Now she wondered whether invisible hands had been arranging events long before she ever left the bakery. But why me? She whispered. Adrian remained silent for several seconds before answering. That's the question that matters. Another secure message appeared on his phone. This time his expression changed in a way Emily had not seen before. Not fear. Recognition. He enlarged an old personnel record attached to the message and quietly studied the faded photograph. Emily noticed a younger version of herself standing beside an elderly man wearing a flower-covered apron inside the bakery years earlier. That's my grandfather, she said softly. Adrian continued staring at the image. I know. Emily blinked in surprise. You've seen this picture before? Adrian nodded almost imperceptibly. 20 years ago, your grandfather owned a small bakery on the south side. Before he passed away. Adrian lowered the phone. One winter afternoon, a frightened teenage boy collapsed outside his shop after being injured during a gang fight. Everyone else walked past him because they were afraid of becoming involved. Emily listened carefully as Adrian's voice became quieter than ever. Your grandfather carried that boy inside, treated his injuries, fed him, and refused to ask his name. He simply said that every person deserved one chance to stand back up. Emily's eyes widened. That boy was you. Adrian met her gaze without denying it. I never forgot his kindness. Emily suddenly remembered stories her grandfather used to tell about helping strangers without expecting anything in return, but he had never mentioned the teenager's identity. She looked down at the old photograph again, realizing that her family's compassion had quietly crossed paths with Adrian's life decades earlier. Before either of them could say another word, one of Adrian's security officers opened the rear communication channel. Sir, he reported urgently. We've intercepted the attacker's signal. They're not here to eliminate you. Adrian's eyes lifted. Then what do they want? The officer hesitated only a moment. Their orders are to take Miss Carter alive. Emily felt the blood drain from her face as the words echoed through the armoured SUV. Take Miss Carter alive. She stared at Adrian, searching for an explanation that neither of them possessed. I don't understand, she whispered. I've never been involved with anything like this. Adrian's steady eyes never left hers. I believe you. Those 3 words carried a certainty that eased her panic, if only slightly. He pressed a button beside his seat, activating a secure channel shared with every vehicle in the convoy. No one opens a door unless I give the order, he instructed calmly. Priority 1 is Miss Carter's safety. We move only when we have a clear path. Every security officer acknowledged immediately. There were no questions, only disciplined confirmation. Outside, the men surrounding the convoy remained strangely patient, as though they were waiting for someone else to make the next move. Adrian watched them for another moment before quietly saying, They're buying time. The older gentleman turned from the front seat. For reinforcements? Adrian slowly shook his head. No, for someone to arrive. Almost on cue, a sleek black sedan rolled into view from the opposite end of the street. It stopped between the waiting SUVs, and a sharply dressed woman stepped onto the pavement with effortless confidence. She wore an elegant ivory coat, her posture composed, her expression unreadable. Emily had never seen her before, but Adrian recognized her immediately. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sophia DeLuca, he said. Emily looked at him. Who is she? The daughter of a powerful family. His voice remained even. And someone my organization once expected me to marry for political reasons. Sophia approached until she stood several yards from the convoy. She raised one hand, signaling the surrounding men to remain where they were. Then she looked directly through the windshield at Adrian before shifting her attention toward Emily. Her smile was polite but completely devoid of warmth. Adrian lowered his window only a few inches, enough to hear without exposing anyone inside. "This is an unusual way to schedule a conversation," he said. Sophia's smile widened slightly. "You forced me to become creative. You arranged tonight. Only the parts that mattered." Her eyes settled on Emily again. "I wanted to meet the woman who made Adrian Moretti cancel a council meeting after knowing her for less than an hour." Emily instinctively shrank back, uncomfortable beneath the stranger's calm scrutiny. Sophia continued, "Relax, Emily. This isn't personal." Adrian's voice grew colder. "Then explain why your people were ordered to take her." Sophia folded her hands in front of her. "Because she's valuable." Emily frowned. "I'm just a baker." "Exactly," Sophia replied. "Someone completely outside our world, which makes your sudden importance fascinating." Adrian remained silent. Sophia took another careful step forward. "The moment Adrian publicly protected you outside the hotel, every camera watching him recorded it. Every rival family now believes you matter to him. Whether you intended it or not, you've become leverage." Emily slowly turned toward Adrian. She finally understood. It wasn't her past. It wasn't the bakery. It wasn't even Ryan. The danger existed because the most feared man in the city had chosen to stand beside her in public. Sophia's expression softened almost sympathetically. "Come with us voluntarily, and no one here needs to get hurt." Adrian answered before Emily could speak. "No." The single word carried absolute certainty. Sophia sighed. "You're choosing emotion over strategy. I'm choosing responsibility. For a stranger?" Adrian looked at Emily before returning his attention to Sophia. "She became my responsibility the moment someone decided to use her against me." Emily felt an unexpected wave of emotion rise inside her. No one had ever defended her with such unwavering conviction. Not because he owed her anything, but because he believed protecting the innocent was simply the right thing to do. Sophia studied Adrian for several silent seconds before giving one small nod. "Then you've confirmed everything I needed to know." She turned and began walking back toward her sedan. Emily watched in confusion. "She's leaving?" Adrian's eyes narrowed. "No." Before Sophia reached her car, every streetlight surrounding the intersection suddenly went dark. The entire block disappeared into shadow. At the same instant, Adrian pressed another concealed button beside his seat. Bright emergency floodlights mounted on the convoy illuminated the street, exposing every hidden position around them. Several armed figures who had been concealed behind construction barriers froze under the sudden light. Adrian spoke calmly into the communication system. "Move now." The lead SUV accelerated, striking aside lightweight barricades, while the second vehicle blocked the nearest attackers from approaching the passenger side. Adrian's driver expertly guided the armored SUV through the narrow opening created by the security team. Emily held tightly to her seat as the convoy surged forward with controlled precision. She glanced backward just long enough to see Sophia standing perfectly still beneath the floodlights, watching them leave without the slightest sign of panic. Adrian noticed the same thing. "She expected us to escape," he said quietly. "Then why stop us?" Emily asked. Adrian looked down at the secure tablet one of his officers had just handed him. A blinking notification displayed an image captured only seconds earlier from a traffic camera. It showed one of the attackers slipping something small beneath the rear of their SUV during the confusion. Adrian's expression darkened as he enlarged the image. "Because getting close to us," he said softly, "was the objective all along." The convoy sped through the sleeping streets of Chicago until it disappeared behind the gates of Adrian Moretti's private estate overlooking Lake Michigan. Only after the final security gate locked into place did the vehicles come to a complete stop. Emily remained silent, trying to process everything that had happened during the past 2 hours. She had left work expecting nothing more than another lonely walk home. Instead, she had become the target of powerful people she had never known existed. Adrian stepped out first before opening her door himself. "You're safe here," he said quietly. Emily looked around at the beautifully restored stone mansion, surrounded by towering oak trees and discreet security personnel. Despite the estate's size and elegance, it felt strangely peaceful rather than intimidating. She followed Adrian inside, where a warm fireplace glowed across polished hardwood floors. A member of the household staff immediately offered tea and a first aid kit, but Adrian accepted both himself. He guided Emily to a comfortable chair and carefully cleaned the bruises still visible on her wrist, where Ryan had grabbed her earlier that evening. His movements were steady and respectful, never hurried, never assuming more familiarity than she was willing to give. Emily watched him in quiet disbelief. "You command dozens of people," she said softly. "You could have asked someone else to do this." Adrian gently secured the final bandage before meeting her eyes. "I could have." "Then why didn't you?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because you were hurt while standing beside me." Emily felt tears gather despite her efforts to hide them. For years she had apologized for taking up space, for asking for help, for believing she deserved kindness. Yet the most feared man in Chicago treated her dignity as something worth protecting, without asking her to become someone different. Adrian noticed the tears and handed her a clean handkerchief, instead of pretending not to see them. "You never have to apologize for surviving," he said, "and you never have to become smaller to deserve respect." Emily smiled through her tears. For the first time in years, those words felt true. A few minutes later, the older gentleman entered the room carrying a secure folder. "Mr. Moretti," he said, "our investigators finished tracing the device attached to the convoy." Adrian accepted the report while Emily quietly listened. "Sophia never intended to kidnap Miss Carter," the older gentleman continued. "The tracking device was designed to identify every safe location you would bring her to. She wanted to discover which places you valued enough to protect." Adrian slowly closed the folder. "Then she underestimated something." "What is that?" Emily asked. Adrian looked at her with calm certainty. "She assumed this house is what I was protecting." Emily frowned. "Isn't it?" He shook his head. "No, I was protecting the person beside me." The room fell silent. Even the older gentleman lowered his eyes respectfully before leaving them alone. Over the following weeks, Adrian quietly dismantled the alliance Sophia had hoped to build against him, exposing the betrayal within his organization through patience, evidence, and loyalty, rather than unnecessary violence. Those responsible for manipulating innocent people lost their influence, while trusted allies remained at his side. Ryan never contacted Emily again after receiving clear legal warnings and realizing that continuing to harass her would only bring consequences he no longer wished to face. Emily gradually returned to the bakery, but her life no longer felt defined by fear. Adrian never asked her to abandon the simple world she loved. Instead, he visited the bakery on quiet mornings, standing in line like any other customer despite owning businesses worth millions of dollars. The regular customers soon noticed the imposing man who always bought the same fresh cinnamon rolls and always smiled only when Emily handed them across the counter. Months later, on a bright autumn afternoon, Adrian invited Emily to the small neighborhood park where her grandfather had once taken her after school. The maple trees glowed with shades of red and gold as children laughed nearby. Adrian reached into his coat pocket, not for an extravagant display of wealth, but for a simple silver ring. "My world has always been built on power," he said softly. "You reminded me that a home is built on trust. Emily Carter, will you build that home with me?" Tears filled her eyes once again, but this time they carried only happiness. "Yes," she whispered. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger before gently taking her hand in front of everyone nearby, without caring who might be watching. For the first time in her life, Emily no longer felt invisible. She felt chosen, respected, and loved exactly as she was. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with perfect plans. Sometimes they begin with impossible accidents, and sometimes one desperate kiss changes two lives forever. If you had been in Emily's place, would you have trusted a complete stranger to save you, or would you have kept running? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next unforgettable Mafia boss romance.